And I would like to welcome Simon to give his oration here over the grave of Michael Collins.
Thank you very much, John. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, distinguished guests and friends. It is a truly enormous honour to be invited to deliver this oration at this hallowed spot. And I'd like to sincerely thank the Collins Griffith Commemoration Society and the Glasnevin Trust for their kind invitation. It is an absolute credit to these organisations that year in and year out, an opportunity is provided for us to gather to honour the two great founding fathers of our state, to reflect on their achievements, and critically, to challenge ourselves on how their lives and sacrifices can inform the work of reimagining our republic today. Since 1923, the Commemoration Committee has organised an unbroken series of annual commemorations at Glasnevin Cemetery in memory of General Michael Collins and President Arthur Griffith. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank members of the Collins and Griffith families. Whilst Irish people feel a great sense of ownership and connection with these two titans of our history, events like today also have a deep personal meaning for your families. And over 100 years on, I know they continue to stir feelings of both pride and pain as we remember the loss of two men whose lives ended far too early within a few short days of each other. I'd also like to acknowledge the voluntary work of the members of the Collins 22 Society, who week after week, come hail or shine, tend to the grave of General Collins and ensure that it is looking its best all year round. Thank you. Michael Collins was just 31 years of age when he was assassinated in an ambush at Bain-le-Blanc. Major General Emmett Dalton, supposedly upon hearing the words "Emmett, I'm hit," together with Commandant Sean O'Connell, ran to his aid. In the words of O'Connell, "How can I describe the feelings that were mine in that bleak hour? Kneeling in the mud of a country road not 12 miles from Clonakilty, with the still bleeding head of the Idol of Ireland resting on my arm." On the 28th of August 1922, 500,000 people lined the streets of Dublin for the funeral of our hero, Michael Collins. The funeral cortege was said to be at least 6 miles long. At the graveside oration, given on this very spot, General Richard Mulcahy, in describing the tsunami of grief that had followed Collins' death, said, "Our country is today bent under a sorrow such as it has not been bent under for many a year. Our minds are cold, are empty, wordless, and without sound." Arthur Griffith was a mere 50 years when he died suddenly, due in no small part to overwork and exhaustion for Ireland. Whereas Collins spilt his blood for Ireland, Griffith spilt his sweat, and both made the ultimate sacrifice to enable the foundation of our country, our now republic, which is today one of Europe's most successful and longest continuing democracies. The writer Ronan McGreevy chronicled how 4 months before his death, Griffith sent a chilling note to his wife on the 15th of April 1922 from Sligo. He said, "In case of anything happening to me, all that I possess to go to my wife. Let a sum of £50, however, be provided for my sister. I hope she will be looked after. Let the people stand firm for the Free State. It is their national need and their economic salvation." Griffith and Collins died just 10 days apart from each other. The cumulative blow to our fledgling Irish state, represented by both their deaths, was truly enormous. Today, Collins and Griffith provide a focal point for this important act of remembrance. And as such focal points, it is important that we also see them as standard bearers of a larger movement, a movement that won our sovereignty, a movement that won our self-determination. Across this great graveyard lie men and women who made unthinkable sacrifices in life and in death in the cause of Irish freedom. Whilst many are household names, Many, many more are not, but they were and they will always remain brave patriots who in small ways or in big ways contributed to the business of nation building. It is perhaps particularly important this year, 100 years since the conclusion of the Irish Civil War, that we remember the many, many lives lost in that conflict. Those of us in the Fine Gael tradition take pride in the sacrifice of the National Army during that period, a contribution which was recognised with the recent opening of the monument here in Glasnevin we see today. Principally through the work of historians such as James Langton and his groundbreaking book, The Forgotten Fallen, we as a society have now been able to fully recall and remember our Civil War dead. We must also today, though, remember those who did not share the Collins and the Griffith view on the treaty, and who too gave their lives believing they were fighting for the cause of Ireland at a time when brother turned on brother and countless friendships and communities were torn apart by violence and by atrocities. In eulogising or memorialising Michael Collins, we do face an immensely challenging task. Which Michael Collins are we specifically calling to mind? Is it Collins, the soldier and revolutionary, a man who returned home to serve in the 1916 Rising, who brought comrades together to train in its aftermath, and who as Director of Intelligence helped to bring the very sustainability of British rule in Ireland to an unprecedented juncture? Or is it Collins, the administrator, a man who ran a revolution through letters and our postal system with a legendary command for detail? Or is it Collins, the statesman, who served as our First Minister for Home Affairs, as our Minister for Finance, whose political career in 5 short years took him from his constituency of Cork South to negotiations in the Cabinet Room in Downing Street, and all too briefly and tragically, the chair of Ireland's provisional government? Perhaps his many roles and many contributions are best summarised in his own words when he said, "People who are very busy are never so busy that they cannot do something extra." And indeed, it's through these many guises, at his various roles in the Irish Volunteers, in the Irish Republican Brotherhood, in Dáil Éireann, and in government, that Collins furthered the cause for Irish freedom. Therefore, I don't think it's possible or particularly useful to view him through any one lens, and this ambiguity of role and responsibility was often managed by him with extraordinary skill to maximise both his impact and his influence. But above all else, Collins was a doer. He believed in action, or as he put it himself in a letter to Kitty Kiernan, he said, "I'm on the side of those who do things, not on the side of those who say things." Despite a century now passing, it is both incredible and a testament to his lasting impact that when we think of Michael Collins, including when young generations do, we don't necessarily think of a purely historical figure who we hear about just through books or school or television. For many of us in Ireland, Michael Collins feels much more familiar, much more close than that. Most of us have some story, some sense of local or family connection to the man we know as the big fella. Indeed, in my own hometown of Greystones, it's a source of great pride to this day that he stayed in our town the evening before travelling to London for the treaty negotiations, receiving the last rites from a priest there in the town prior to taking the train to what was then Kingstown, now Dunleary, to board the ferry there. It is this sense of familiarity which has only been further enhanced since his life and his work were popularised on the big screen and re-examined as part of our successful decade of centenaries. But perhaps this sense of familiarity and closeness is also a recognition of another important reality. Michael Collins is more than just a human figure in our history. He has now come to embody and become an enduring symbol of all that we are proud of in our past and all that we hope for in our future. We commemorate Michael Collins, the man, the statesman, the patriot, the founding father, but we also today acknowledge and appreciate beyond words the most powerful tool he has passed to future generations: the ability to self-determine, to be free, to chart our own course, to plan our own future. That is a major part of the legacy, of the impact, of that enduring connection to this day and for every future day with General Michael Collins. It's not uncommon for politicians and media commentators to appropriate the writing and speeches of Collins to show support for any number of contemporary issues or causes that they're championing. However, in my own view, I think we serve Michael Collins best when we see him within the context of the times that he lived. It was Napoleon who famously said, "To understand a man, you have to understand what's happening in the world when he's 20. And the world Collins encountered in his formative years was in so many respects very different to the world in which we live today. That world was dominated by a small number of large empires. Our country was legally and politically forming a part of the United Kingdom and the British Empire, and it was almost wholly reliant on an agrarian economy. We had low life expectancy, we had poor literacy, we had deep and prevalent poverty. Concepts such as freedom of small nations, human rights, universal suffrage, and the peaceful transfer of power were yet to emerge, or where they had emerged were heavily contested. And disputes between nations were nearly always settled through violence and through war. In this context, Michael Collins fought to establish an independent Ireland, built in the form of a republican democracy. Whilst today the idea of our republic may seem inevitable, it was nothing less than a revolutionary concept in the world in which Collins reached his adulthood. A committed republican who shared the thoughts and ideals which were prevalent amongst Irish nationalists of his generation. He was not, though, a prisoner to idealism or afraid of compromise. His ability to negotiate, not just in terms of the treaty, but on a day-to-day basis in his engagement with organisations, with political issues, with military disputes, helped to turn revolutionary ideas, which were far from certain, to the reality which we all enjoy and benefit from to this very day. I think it's worth reflecting for a moment or two on what to me was one of Collins's most enduring characteristics, his deep devotion to and defence of democratic values. In his book, The Path to Freedom, Collins wrote, "Of all forms of government, a democracy allows the greatest freedom, the greatest possibilities for the good of all. But such a government, like all governments, must be recognised and obeyed. The first duty of a new government is to maintain public order, security of life, personal liberty and property. The duty of leaders is to secure free discussion of public policy and to get all parties to recognise that while they differ, they're fellow citizens of one free state. It should be the political glory of Ireland to show that our differences of opinion can express themselves so as to promote and not destroy the national life," end quote. So it's perhaps no surprise that the celebrity of Collins, a man once referred to as the most wanted man in the world, with a bounty of £10,000 on his head, captures the imagination, captures so much of our national attention. Yet no recollection of the establishment of the Free State and of the establishment of Ireland can be complete without due deference and remembrance of Arthur Griffith. Griffith understood more than most that a nation can never be truly independent or never enjoy self-determination unless it enjoys true economic independence. He believed in developing the Irish economy to ensure the sovereignty of the Irish nation. And perhaps our own generation sadly knows all too well the bitter truth of this fact and the pain and the reduction of independence when economic sovereignty is undermined, is compromised and is put at risk. Indeed, my generation continues to pay a high price for the past economic mismanagement of this country. They see it today on their payslip. They see it in the impact of the lost years of investment. They see it in the opportunity cost of an economic crisis. And they also see it in the impact of the collapse of key sectors of our economy, including construction, which then had to be rebuilt almost from scratch. So true independence can never be fully realised if a country is not economically sound. Some current day political leaders would do well to reflect on this vital, on this important fact. We have come too far to go back to an era of economic populism and economic mismanagement, and Fine Gael will and must pursue policies that heal the scars that are still borne today by this generation of the economic crash. Griffith is often criticised for his economic protectionist instincts and even blamed in some quarters for the direction of the Irish economy in the early decades after independence. However, he's very unfairly served by this narrow reading. As we mark 50 years of Ireland's membership of the European Union, we should remind ourselves that it was Griffith who first advocated that Ireland's economic future was not best served by a reliance on Britain alone, but by looking to other states, particularly other small states within Europe. Griffith was, in many respects, one of the great intellectuals of the Republican movement, often referred to as the last young Irelander, as a fierce supporter of Parnell. His thinking on constitutional concepts are closely aligned to that ultimate treaty settlement, a settlement which enabled successive governments to take office, to come to power, and to step ever closer to the Republican model which Griffith was ultimately so committed to. He's often mistaken as a pacifist, but he was prepared to take whatever actions were required to defend the best interests of the Irish people once they had been democratically expressed at a ballot box. That his grave, as we saw only moments ago, is marked by an unfinished pillar, is not just symbolic of his life and the cutting short of his work, but rather should be seen as a challenge to every generation of Irish people, a call to action, to work to complete the unfinished and somewhat unending work of building this republic. The challenge of harnessing the freedom his generation strived and sacrificed for, and putting it to work in the interests of our people today and the challenges and opportunities of our time. In Collins' speech to the Dáil during the treaty debate, he famously asked deputies to not simply ask whether the dead men would agree with it, but whether the living approve of it. Perhaps that is also our task today. In remembering the contribution of these two great Gaels, we must ask ourselves, how can we now contribute to reimagining an Ireland and a republic with the approval of all its people, which works for all its people? We as a people, we as a country, we as a collection of communities have, over the last 100 years, worked tirelessly and together to deploy the great gift given to us by Collins and Griffith and their contemporaries, the ability for a nation to create its own future, the freedom to achieve freedom, but not just territorial freedom, civil, political, social and economic freedoms. And collectively, this country can be proud of so much of the progress we have made. Full employment, access to education, huge advancements in health outcomes, the right to love whoever you love, the concept of a social floor, membership of the European Union, policing by consent, peacekeeping overseas, a country at the cutting edge of science and technology, an enduring democracy, the envy of many, and most vitally, one of the most successful peace agreements in the world. So to those who talk down Ireland for their own cheap political gain, we will not fall for your trap. We will not pander to your negativity. We will not let you disregard the achievements enabled by the great generation we honour today and all those generations that have come after. But of course, a refusal to allow people talk down this country is in no way contradictory to the acknowledgement of the need to do more and the massive challenges and opportunities that we face today. In fact, it's actually complementary, because the successes to date of this country inspire us. They motivate us, they encourage us and convince us of our ability to face up to and overcome any challenge that comes the way of Ireland. So now, though, is the time to bravely build a new social contract, one which doesn't rest on our laurels or just talk about the successes of our past, but one which sets about renewing our promise as a republic, one which balances rights and responsibilities, one which tries to meet the legitimate expectations of our time and our generation, that if you work hard in Ireland, if you play by the rules, the state will play its part too. One that respects that your hard-earned money you pay in tax has to be linked to the delivery of services that you and your family need now and may need in the future. One which recognises the need to create true equality of opportunity, though no matter who you are, where you live, or what your parents did before you, you can reach your full potential. One which removes any remaining barriers to access to education for anyone, at all levels, and to employment. And one which ensures home ownership is brought back into the reach of all who need it. It must be one which realises that we must pass this earth onto the next generation. And we can't shirk or ignore that challenge, no matter how difficult it is. And crucially, because this is Ireland, one that values community, neighbours, decency and kindness, and recognises the ingenuity of the Irish people, is our greatest national resource, and harnessing it is key to our collective future. I'm in politics and in public life long enough to know that in any republic, challenges never disappear, they just change. And this generation must and will step up. We must be bold in our leadership, in our vision, in our policies, to build a country that works for all who call it home. Because thanks to Michael Collins, thanks to Arthur Griffith, we have the ability to self-determine our future. It is in our hands. Griffith and Collins, of course, never, ever saw the treaty negotiations as the final word on the future of Ireland, or on Irish unity. In the words of Parnell, who went before them, no man has the right to fix the boundary of the march of a nation. No man has the right to say to his country, thus far shalt thou go and no further. We now live in a country and on an island which has an enduring peace agreement. And contained within that agreement is a framework which could, by democratic majority, see Ireland united again. It is often, conveniently or otherwise, forgotten by others, but never by us, that the full name of the Fine Gael party is Fine Gael, the United Ireland Party. And as we embark on our second century of independence, the work of uniting people continues. It is a legitimate political aspiration, which I passionately believe in, to see Ireland reunited. And no one party in this republic has a monopoly on that aspiration. But sloganeering is not a policy. And in fact, in isolation, it can just offend and hurt. In fact, sometimes those who like to portray themselves as the most committed to the cause of unity can, through both action and inaction, end up driving people on this island further apart. A united Ireland cannot just be about geographic unity. It must be about hearts. It has to be about minds. It must be about people. It has to be about inclusion and respect. You don't unite Ireland by uniting one community and alienating another. You plan a shared island. You work together. Today we work so closely together on this island on so many issues. Cancer patients in Donegal go to Glasnevin for treatment. Life-saving heart operations for our most precious possession, our children, from Belfast take place in Dublin. Apprenticeships are designed to help people build homes on an all-island basis. Students from Limerick study in Derry. Because, my friends, rising sea levels, global pandemics, great technological shifts are ignorant, or at least agnostic, to geography or to emblem. So we keep at it. We keep at the Collins vision, the freedom to achieve freedom, the stepping stone, the building of relationships, the learning about and respecting each other and our perspectives and our traditions. We live in times of uncertainty, times of challenge, and truthfully, times of great worry. As we stand at the grave of Michael Collins, we mourn his loss, the loss of Griffith, the loss of so many of that great generation in times of division. But we also recall the words of George Bernard Shaw in a letter to Collins' sister Hannie. My dear Miss Collins, don't make them make you miserable about it. How could a born soldier die better than at the victorious end of a good fight, fall into the shot of an Irishman, a damned fool but all the same an Irishman who thought he was fighting for Ireland? I rejoice in Michael's memory and will not be so disloyal as to snivel over his valiant death. So tear up your mourning and hang out your brightest colours in his honour. Because, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to Michael Collins, thanks to Arthur Griffith, thanks to the people of this great country, our best days in this republic are yet to come. Fair meal of.